and costumed cast has returned to the cathedral on Saturday, December 30th and Sunday, December 31st. Full details, including ticket information and times, at boarsheadfestival.com.
Whether your smart speaker is Amazon or Google, the local, national, and world news you want is always there by simply saying play WVXU.
I'm Amy Held with these headlines. Another border crossing into Gaza is expected to open, which could allow much-needed aid in for desperate Palestinians, according to the White House. There's no word on when. The Kerem Shalom crossing would be the first direct entry of aid from Israel since the war against Hamas began in October. After years of pressure from privacy advocates, Google says it will stop saving location data from its Maps app in the cloud. Police often rely on the information as part of criminal investigations. Now, Google says it will start saving the history on phones so it won't be accessible. And today, Boston celebrates the brewing American Revolution that led to independence with reenactments on the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. Amy Held, NPR News, Washington.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Melville Charitable Trust, committed to ensuring all people have a safe, stable, and affordable home that allows them to thrive. Information about ways to prevent and solve homelessness is at melvilletrust.org. From Luminescence Foundation, dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Political candidates in Taiwan have debated for years whether to build more nuclear power plants. The issues come to the fore in the weeks before next month's elections. NPR's Emily Fang reports that voters are concerned the island's energy security could be disrupted by a simple blockade from China.
I meet Wu Wenzhang, an anti-nuclear activist, and we take a drive. He points out the profile of the Longmen nuclear power plant from the highway. In 2021, a referendum to restart construction on it was defeated, in part due to Wu's activism. As they take pictures, Wu gets into an argument with the security guards who try to shoo him away. This tense relationship between the abandoned nuclear plant facility and residents is a testament to how divisive the issue of nuclear energy is in Taiwan. There's lots of concerns about where to safely store nuclear waste on a tiny island.
We feel if we don't protect our own homes and a nuclear plant is built nearby, and then there's ever a nuclear meltdown, we'll be doomed.
Taiwan relies on coal imports to generate nearly half of its electricity. Less than a tenth comes from nuclear plants built in the 1980s. All in all, the island imports about 97% of its energy, including nuclear fuel. But that can last for up to 2 years if there's a potential Chinese blockade.
Energy is a security issue.
This is Huang Shixiu, a prominent pro-nuclear campaigner and political spokesperson. He says the need for nuclear power plants is greater these days as China's military becomes more advanced.
China's army wouldn't have to do much for Taiwan to surrender. Even a typhoon in the Taiwan Strait that stopped our natural gas deliveries for over a week would mean losing half of our electricity supply.
Environmental activists say the island should not have to sacrifice its environmental safety just because China next door threatens to invade. Attitudes towards nuclear energy are also split along political lines. The island's KMT party, which ruled the island as an authoritarian military state until the 1990s, built Taiwan's nuclear plants, which makes the issue emotional. Nuclear is bound up with Taiwan's authoritarian past. Wu strongly associates nuclear energy with the period of KMT rule and martial law he was born under.
The KMT controlled all the nuclear plants. They started confiscating land to build plants in the 1970s. But because Taiwan is not democratized, we did not dare protest against those plans.
Now they can, and protest Wu did. But despite Taiwan's democratization in the 1990s, he says he still cannot trust the once ruling KMT party and its promises on nuclear.
We have long been tricked by the KMT, just as they tricked us on the promise of nuclear.
Instead, like many in the environmental lobby, he argues Taiwan should go all in on renewable energy. Indeed, Taiwan is developing big offshore wind projects, but they're expensive and years behind schedule. And so the island remains dependent on energy imports that could be vulnerable to a potential Chinese blockade. In the shadow of the vacant Longmen power plant, Wu, now retired, gardens and raises animals.
This is land my father left to me, and his father left to him.
It's this connection to this land that drove Wu in his activism. Land his family's had from before the KMT took control over Taiwan and before Beijing laid claim over the island. And it's also why the clash between conflicting priorities will continue, between those who want to make Taiwan safe for its residents and those who want to make it safe against China. Emily Fang, NPR News, Fulong Beach, Taiwan.
On a cold December night 250 years ago, a group of men destroyed a lot of tea. The Boston Tea Party helped fuel the American Revolution, but historians say what many of us were taught about that day is not entirely accurate. Gabriela Emanuel of member station WBUR looks anew at one of the most storied events in U.S. history.
For starters, the Boston Tea Party had very little to do with tax hikes. It was almost all about monopoly power and lack of representation. The British Parliament had just given the British East India Company a monopoly on selling tea in America as a bailout to the teetering companies. This would have actually made tea cheaper, but colonists up and down the East Coast were furious. They didn't have a say.
The tea is really a symbol of who governs us.
That's historian Robert Allison of Suffolk University.
Do we really govern ourselves, or are we now governed by a force we can't control?
In Boston, colonists converged on what was then the biggest building on the busiest street, the Old South Meeting House. It's red brick with a steeple. Nat Scheidling oversees the historic building.
The eyewitness account said there were 5,000 people in this space, and that's 5,000 people in a town of 15,000, right? So a third of the town crammed in here like sardines.
People hung off the balconies and spilled out into the streets, discussing what to do with the tea. As night fell on the 20th day of debate, the crowd got word the pro-British governor was insisting the ships of tea be unloaded. Revolutionary leader Samuel Adams stood up and said, "This meeting can do nothing more to save the country." That was apparently the signal for more than 100 men to head to the nearby wharf.
This was the moment where there was no backing down.
If you are here to cast off that yoke of parliamentary tyranny, say aye!
Christine Strong is a reenactor for the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum in Boston Harbor. That night, many men wore blankets and put soot on their faces to hide their identity. Despite later images and paintings, there were no Native American headdresses, but historians say some of the men were loosely disguised as indigenous people.
And we are all aware we are committing treason, aye? And we all know the punishment for treason is death. Indeed, death by hanging, and that's a fate I should hope we all avoid.
Here's the part of the story you likely know. The Patriots hauled chests of tea out of the cargo holds of 3 ships, broke them open with axes, and chucked the tea and crates overboard into the chilly Boston Harbor at low tide. One of the ships had a pacifist Quaker captain from Cape Cod who even let his crew participate in the protest if they wanted. Thousands of pounds of tea washed ashore. Today that'd be worth more than $1.5 million. Despite the Boston Tea Party's name, this was no drunken party, nor was it a violent affair. Historian Allison says it was disciplined, methodical, carefully planned.
A crowd does come and watch this happening on the docks, and people comment on how orderly they are, how quiet they are.
The focus was on making a political statement. None of the other cargo was disturbed. Allison says the colonists even swept the ships clean and tended to a broken padlock.
They send someone into town to get a new one, to replace it. And I have to confess, Bostonians did tend toward a lot of street violence in the 1760s and 1770s, which makes this so much more remarkable.
But not everyone was impressed.
George Washington and Benjamin Franklin think they really went too far. You know, Washington is kind of aghast at this destruction of property.
The British were also aghast and reacted strongly. They shut down the port of Boston, crippling the local economy. The British suspended town meetings and local elections.
What Massachusetts does is actually calls for a meeting of the other colonies, which is a huge risk. It could be the other colonies will say, you wacky Puritans really went too far this time.
But they didn't. The colonies were shocked by the British reaction, and they rallied in support, setting themselves on a path that led to the Revolutionary War less than 2 years later, and soon to the creation of a new nation. For NPR News, I'm Gabriela Emanuel in Boston.
Get about your chair for the HBCU Marching Band of the Year competition. It pits the Roar, Florida Memorial University against Virginia State University's Trojan Explosion, and the Blue and Gold Marching Machine of North Carolina A&T against Jackson State University's Sonic Boom of the South. What makes a marching band a truly great marching band? Tune in. Find out on your phone, your smart speaker, or your radio. Time will shout it out after that promo. And it's time for sports. The Golden State Warriors. Oh, are they bad? The New England Patriots, even worse. It's a curtain time for the 21st century's most dominant dynasties. Oh, I'm still speaking like the British. Howard Bryant of Better Luck Media joins us. How are you, Howard?
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Let's start with the Warriors' Draymond Green. NBR, well, they do that too.
He got traded. He got traded.
He got traded, right. Boy, we'll make good use of it. The NBA suspended him second time this season, this time indefinitely, for striking an opposing player during a game. He did that before this season, also last. I was struck, forgive the expression, by what Steve Kerr, the coach, said. This is about more than basketball. It's about helping Draymond. It's an opportunity for Draymond to step away and make a change in his approach in his life. What, if I might put it this way, strikes you out?
Well, I think what struck me about this is how quickly a guy who had a reputation as sort of an edgy enforcer is now essentially being treated for mental health. That's the entire story now, is talking about, you listen to the players, his former teammate Kevin Durant, you listen to his coach talking about getting him the help that he needs. Here's a player who last year punched his teammate Jordan Poole before the season started, and this team never recovered from it. He's had 2 physical altercations already this season. He hasn't really spoken publicly yet on this. It'll be very interesting to see what the NBA thinks in terms of what an indefinite suspension means. Roughly, it'll be about 10 games, I think. But indefinite could be longer than that, or maybe a little bit less. But what's happening right now is that here's a player who is integral to a dynasty of 4 championships, clearly being talked about on a Hall of Fame track, and now it appears that there's a fair amount of his career that is in jeopardy, even though he signed a 4-year, $100 million contract.
Yeah. Golden State's well out of the playoff race. They're just an average team now.
Well, I think what it is that we always wonder what it's going to look like when you see these great teams, and when you remember Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and that team just running through the league. Remember, they won 73 games one year, and now they are mortal. This is what age looks like. This is what time looks like, and you start to see the rest of the league has caught up to them. They're not as good, and there's a lot of basketball left. You can still make the playoffs, but you look at them. Making the playoffs was not the Golden State Warriors. Winning the championship for them has been what this run has been all about. 6 NBA finals, 4 championships, and now they're just another team for now, but we'll see what they do for the rest of the year. But generally speaking, this is what the end sort of looks like. But I'll tell you something else, Scott. If you are a basketball fan in Oakland, San Francisco, in the Bay Area, you remember the old days. This team gave you a hell of a lot more than you ever expected. So this is the end sometimes.
Tom Brady looks like he got out of the Patriots just in time. They're 3-10. Bill Belichick, obviously widely regarded as one of the great head coaches of all time, but not many 3-10 coaches get invited back, do they?
No, they don't, and even him, considering maybe the greatest coach of all time, 19 straight winning seasons with the Patriots, 9 Super Bowls, 6 Super Bowl championships, and once again, this is what time and this is what age looks like for them. It's unlikely he'll be back this year, which is sort of remarkable as well. But I think when you look at the Patriots, one of the biggest problems with them is Bill Belichick. He is also the GM. He's responsible for replenishing the talent. And after Tom Brady, that hasn't really happened. And it looks like a very sad end to a dynasty. But once more, no New Englander will ever complain about football again after what they gave this region.
Yeah, for so many years. Howard Bryant of Meadowlark Media, thanks so much for being with us. And happy holidays.
Thank you, Scott. Same to you.
You're listening to Weekend Edition from NPR News. A fiery train crash sparked a push for rail safety this year, but as Frank Morris of member station KCUR reports, the Railway Safety Act of 2023 may have run off the tracks.
Remember back in February, when TV news was dominated by a huge flaming train wreck in a tiny town?
Breaking news tonight, an emergency situation unfolding right now in East Palestine, Ohio, after a train derailed.
It felt like a post-apocalyptic. It felt like the only way I could think about it is like running away from a tornado.
Hillary Flint, who lives 4 miles from the crash site, was driving away from the towering cloud of boiling black smoke.
It reminded me of the photos I'd seen of the atomic bomb.
An overheated wheel bearing failed, tipping 38 rail cars off the tracks, including 11 carrying toxic chemicals. Nobody was hurt at first, but the chemical fallout from the fire lingered, and people like Flint say they suffered sore throats, rashes, headaches for months.
I think what happened here really woke people up.
And it drew lots of attention, including a visit from former President Donald Trump.
To the people of East Palestine and to the nearby communities in Ohio and Pennsylvania, we have told you loud and clear you are not forgotten.
The wreck sparked bipartisan legislation. The Railway Safety Act of 2023 would force railroads to deploy more sensors to detect failing wheel bearings, to alert local officials to hazardous trains, and set the size of train crews. It was co-sponsored by conservative Republicans and Democrats like Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown.
This railroad bill, railway safety bill, is an attempt to blunt some of that overreach and some of that greed that corporate executives at the railroads have foisted upon the American public.
In recent years, railroads have cut about a third of their employees, stretched the length of trains, and banked record profits. Brown says staffing is thin, safety has suffered, and that the Railway Safety Act aims to turn that around.
The railroads want only one engineer. Our law says there have to be at least 2 people working on these trains at all times.
That mandatory 2-person crew size is a major sticking point. Ian Jeffries, president of the Association of American Railroads, says the train crews have already dropped from 5 down to 2 as technology keeps advancing.
At the same time, we've seen dramatic safety improvements across every aspect of the industry.
Jeffries says derailments are down about 30% in the last 2 decades. Hazardous chemical spills are off more than 70%, he says.
Last year was one of the best years in the entire history of this industry, if not the best.
Railroads hate wrecks. After all, accidents kill valuable employees. They destroy gear, scramble schedules, and spark lawsuits. They cost lots of money. And since East Palestine, Jeffrey says railroads have reached out to millions of local first responders, letting them know when trains are toting hazardous stuff, what it is, and what to do if it leaks out. So one major goal of the Railway Safety Act is already taking hold, but the act itself has been stuck in the Senate for months.
For all intents and purposes, it's dead.
Bill Vontuano, editor-in-chief at Railway OH, says the Railway Safety Act would lock in outdated safety technology. He says it's good politics, but bad legislation. coming before the government's East Palestine crash investigation is even completed.
It wasn't needed in the first place. It was a huge waste of time. Nothing but a political stunt. And if it is in fact dead, which I think it is, good riddance.
Well, not so fast. Senator Brown admits the legislation faces a Republican filibuster, and that Congress faces lots of other problems right now. But Brown says he still hopes to get a full Senate vote on the Railway Safety Act of 2023 by the end of the year. For NPR News, I'm Frank Morris in Kansas City.
This is NPR News.
Poland has hosted what some call the Piano Olympics for nearly a century. A new documentary follows the intense musical journeys of the young musicians who compete in it.
I'm not trying to make a film about the winner. I know much more about not winning than winning.
Director Jakub Piotek on his film Piano Forte. Sunday on Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Support comes from Joseph Clark Gallery, located in Northside, where African culture celebrates African art. You can immerse yourself in the energy of tribal masks, traditional wooden and bronze figures, tribal currencies, textiles, and jewelry, along with original paintings and artwork from local artists. Learn more at josephclarkgallery.com.
We're fully into the holiday season on TV, so don't miss your favorite shows. For the 37th year, John Keyswater has the rundown of TV and radio specials happening this month on our website, wvxu.org.
I'm Amy Held with these headlines. On Capitol Hill, talks are ongoing for a deal linking U.S.-Mexico border policy to billions in aid for Ukraine and Israel. Amid disagreements, the Senate is expected to try to advance a bill next week. The Israeli soldiers who shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza, mistaking them for the enemy yesterday, did not follow Israel's rules of engagement, an Israeli military official said today. A report finds the hostages were waving a white flag. Arizona is sending National Guard troops to the southern border to help with the influx of migrants, nearly 2 weeks after the federal government shuttered the port of entry in rural Lukeville, Arizona. Governor Katie Hobbs says the closure is hurting communities relying on tourism and trade. Amy Held, NPR News, Washington.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts. From Organic Valley, a farmer-owned cooperative dedicated to providing ethically sourced food from small organic family farms across the country. Learn more at ov.coop/ethically sourced. And from the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people at wtgrantfdn.org.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Hairdressers, barbers, estheticians, all can be privy to some of their clients' deepest secrets. And when it comes to domestic violence, they might be helpful. There is a bill aimed at providing them with training to recognize signs of abuse in their clients. Natasha Sinyanovich reports.
Domestic violence hinges on controlling someone, on isolating them from support systems. And hair salons are among the few places many victims can visit alone.
The people who are cutting your hair are going to notice the bruises on your neck, are going to notice that you're tender around areas where perhaps you've been struck.
That's Illinois Democrat Tammy Duckworth. She's co-sponsoring a new bipartisan Senate bill by Tennessee Republican Marsha Blackburn. It's based on laws that already exist in their states and one other. In Tennessee, for example, all beauty industry professionals must take free domestic abuse awareness training as part of their recertification process. Hairstylist Suzanne Post was crucial in getting that law passed to help abuse survivors.
We may be the person that is in the position to gently nudge them when it's time.
Time to find an exit strategy. Post created the online training used in her state. It teaches to lend a compassionate ear, but not push anyone to just leave. That, she says, could be fatal.
It has to be the right time, and you can't force that for someone else.
Instead, says Post, sprinkle your shop with flyers about victim services. At most, discreetly hand a client a hotline number. Post also consulted on the Senate bill. It would give a grant to states that make the training mandatory. And it also includes barbers. Statistically, at least 1 in 6 domestic violence victims in the U.S. are men. who often find it hard to open up about abuse, says barber in training Tamaya Harding.
I have been in situations where I had my male clients have scratches on their face and their neck, and maybe their eye is black, and I ask those questions like, well, what happened? How did you get this? And they'll begin to tell me their story.
Harding is in Michigan, and her barber school includes this training as part of the curriculum. She says the biggest eye-opener for her was that domestic violence conversations don't have to come after serious injury or death. That prevention is possible.
We only talk about it when something tragic happens. We never talk about it in a way to stop it from happening.
It's unclear whether the new bill will get any traction in Congress. Meanwhile, Suzanne Post's free online training is growing. She says more than 100,000 beauty industry professionals have taken it worldwide. For NPR News, I'm Natasha Sinyanovich.
Paul Lynch's novel Prophet Song has just won the 2023 Booker Prize a few weeks ago. It's set in modern Dublin, and there's an unnamed pandemic, an unspecified national emergency. When one night Eilish, a biologist for a biotech company and mother of four, answers a knock at the door. Two police officers are looking for her husband Larry, leader in the teachers union. They say it's nothing to worry about. Soon Eilish finds herself in a world in which loved ones go missing. Co-workers are led away. People turn on water taps to avoid being overheard, and church bells ring out. There seems to be no mercy. Paul Lynch joins us from Dublin. Thank you so much for being with us, and certainly congratulations on winning the Booker.
Thank you, Scott. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Did you set out to write a story set in Syria?
It's funny, my editor, Juliet Maybe at One World, has given out to me for having, she says, you've produced at least 3 origin stories for this book. And I've laughed because the truth is you just don't know. Like, there's so many things that nucleate around sort of core ideas in your subconscious. But the modern world was leaking in, and you know the book is set in Dublin, though. It's a dream of a modern Ireland. It's a sort of, maybe it's a counterfactual Ireland. Perhaps it's set in the future. I don't specify that, and there's a reason why I don't specify. I'm allowing a space for the reader to sort of occupy, where I'm not identifying the background politics. That's completely besides the point. I'm paying attention to the sort of the beating heart of the moment, the sort of personal cost of events. I'm watching Eilish, I'm seeing how she responds to something that I don't think has been properly articulated before in fiction, or at least not in the way that I'm interested in. I think of a great work like the Iliad, and where that foregrounds the politics, it foregrounds the heroics. And I wondered what if you turn that inside out? You'd be left with people like Eilish Stack in Prophet Song, the stories that aren't told, that only the novelist can truly reach and take hold of. And that's what I wanted to do in this book, when I'm following the exploits of a family trying to stay together, a mother who's trying to navigate a labyrinth, because that's what effectively this is.
I found myself, and not just because of the similarity in names, I found myself fascinated by Simon, Eilish's father. Suffers from memory loss, but clear-eyed about the future?
Yeah, Simon is interesting because what he's losing, because he's sliding into dementia, is also a memory of the past that we might all know now. You know, life in a liberal democracy that's beginning to unravel. And Simon has these moments where he's sliding out of reality, and then there are these extraordinarily lucid insights where he tells Eilish, you need to leave. And this is one of the big questions of the book, is how do you know when to leave? And the problem that Eilish encounters is, well, leaving is the hardest thing in the world when you're completely entangled in life. And this is what the book's exploring, how truly enmeshed we are. And I suppose I learned in writing this book that what we are our entanglements. Our identities are our career, our children, our relatives, the place in which we grow up. And that to be forced to leave those things, they have to be unplugged one by one by one by one until you've got nothing left. And then you will be shunted out.
You have written that you worry, you wonder about if novels can be important anymore, if they can capture our attention the way so many other media, I hate to use the word platform, but there you go. can be. What do you feel about the power of a novel?
I think that we all know, all of us, that our attention has been atomized by the times that we live in, by the sort of the tyranny of the tyranny of the now, the sense of bombardment of social media, of our bleeping phones. And then, of course, there's just the spectacle of modern life. There's the television, we watch the news, and I think we've become completely inured to it. And we have to be inured to it, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. And yet, what we're watching has great import, and it's very difficult to connect with what we're seeing. So I wondered about that. I wondered about how can fiction work its way around our defenses so that not sympathy but empathy becomes possible. And I say this with a caveat that I'm not interested as a novelist in bringing a message to the world. I'm not interested in being a writer who has a political message, because I just think that would be so limited. I think true complexity requires a myriad number of lenses. I say all that, and at the same time, I think this book carries moral weight. It arrives at a place of moral weight. And I do seek to bypass these self-defenses. And the novel used to have this whisper in the ear. It was at the center of the culture, and it didn't have to fight so hard to be heard. This is just my own small way. I'm just a guy in Dublin. I'm just a guy working in his house in Dublin.
Well, but a guy who's just won the Booker, which immediately makes you, I don't have to tell you, one of the most significant novelists in the world, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I'm finding myself sort of plucked and placed onto the world stage. You're probably approaching the 60th interview since I've won this prize, and I'm burning out, Scott. There's so little left to me at this point, and it's only the start of it, from what I gather. And it's an interesting thing for it to happen. In Irish literature, it's a tremendous thing. I'm the 6th Irish writer to win this prize. And so there comes with it a role, I suppose, within the culture here. And that's a role I'm willing to meet, because it's an honour to win such an extraordinary prize.
How many of us among the 60 who interviewed you have asked, what do we do now?
Nobody. What do we do now? I recommend silence. You just sit in silence. I think silence is the solution to the moment we're in. I'm trying to grab as many moments of silence as I can at the moment. I'm a meditator. I think the solution to the problem is to actually go inside and to get that, not the whisper in the ear, but the whisper of your own oracle. And it's such a challenge to hear, and it gets drowned out by the modern world. Go for a hike, sit down in a chair and turn your phone off, read a book, listen to your thoughts. That's what we need to do.
Paul Lynch, his new novel, winner of this year's Booker Prize, Prophet Song. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
So the shortest day came, and the year died. And everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing, to drive the dark away.
Thursday, December 21 is the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere.
They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive.
For more than 40 years, people have been reading and performing Susan Cooper's poem, The Shortest Day, to celebrate the winter solstice.
And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Down all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen.
In 2019, we spoke to Susan Cooper about the children's book she created from the poem.
It's a family celebration of the light coming back after the dark threatens to take over the world.
We've been asking authors and illustrators how they work together or work separately to translate words into pictures. For The Shortest Day, Susan Cooper collaborated with Carson Ellis, the illustrator, by mail.
I said in a letter to Carson that there is no story in this poem. We have to put the story in the pictures. So it's up to you, kid. And she certainly did.
It was one long, beautiful, very forthright, kind of daunting letter that Susan wrote to me, kind of telling me what she wanted the book to be able to do. And it completely changed the direction I was going in, and it was really daunting. I read the letter and thought, oh gosh, this is a much harder book. My initial response was that I wanted it to look sort of like a Bruegel painting. If you know who Bruegel is, he's like a 16th century painter. He painted this really famous painting called Hunters in the Snow, I think. A lot of people would recognize it. And he painted a lot of medieval scenes and a lot of great
There were experts being like, how fast would a like 89-pound woman have to hit a man causing traumatic brain injury? And it was like also like this idea of like the goop guru slash wellness woman slash nepo baby slash very, very wealthy white woman versus a guy who was like, yeah, was he credible? I'm not entirely sure. The judge did not rule in his favor, but there were a lot of sound bites about what happened on those slopes.
Is it true that you feel it's unfair that Mr. Sanderson has brought this case against you?
I do. And it was just a very absurd time for everyone.
And he has deterred you from enjoying the rest of what was a very expensive vacation.
Well, I lost half a day of skiing. Yes.
Right. We could just kind of just relax and just enjoy the mess for what it was.
But I mean, the course decided in her favor. It's been decided. But yes, that was a very compelling beef this year.
There was a good image of her leaving the courtroom, and when she got it ruled in her favor, she like whispered something into his ear that was like, good day to you or something. And you're just like, it's the most menacing photo you've ever seen. If you've ever seen a rich white woman mad at you. The heat coming off of that photo is so incredible.
Well, now it's time to find out who the winner is. Who is going to take home the crown for the best beef of 2023? The envelope, please. And the winner is... Oh my gosh, I won! Everyone versus AI. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Whew, Lori. All right, our next category, Villain of the Year. Who will take home the prize? We'll find out right after a quick break. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR.
Support comes from Water Tower Fine Wines to help you celebrate, toast, and cheer in the new year. Water Tower Fine Wines offers a selection of over 250 champagnes and over 100 sparkling wines from around the globe. To shop their selection of bubbly, visit watertowerfinewines.com. Support comes from Hawksworth Blood Center, University of Cincinnati, the only provider of blood products to over 30 tri-state hospitals. Hawksworth operates 7 neighborhood donor centers in greater Cincinnati and northern Kentucky, making it convenient for you to join their mission in saving lives close to home. More information at hawksworth.org.
Support comes from Joseph Clark Gallery, located in Northside, where African culture celebrates African art. You can immerse yourself in the energy of tribal masks, traditional wooden and bronze figures, tribal currencies, textiles, and jewelry, along with original paintings and artwork from local artists. Learn more at josephclarkgallery.com.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Made in Cookware, partnering with chefs like Tom Colicchio to bring professional-grade cookware to restaurants and home kitchens. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. From Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from a single platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Welcome back to the It's Been a Minute from NPR Culture Award Show for 2023. I'm your host, Brittany Luce, here with NPR's Aisha Roscoe and Vox's Alex Abad-Santos. And we are looking back on 2023 by handing out awards in this year's premier categories. So far, we've declared a winner for Word of the Year. It was Riz, the Gen Z word for charisma. Get it? Riz. I got mad Riz. And winner for Best Beef, which was Everyone versus AI. Myself, Aisha, and Alex all selected nominees for each category, and a select group of culture experts at NPR voted for a winner. So, without further ado, let's get to our next category. All right, so for our next category, it needs no introduction. It's time for Villain of the Year. The person or thing who really showed just how devious they are. So my nominee in this category are these Hollywood studio execs going back and forth with the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild in their very long and drawn out contract negotiations this year. Oh my gosh, I mean, who could forget the unnamed executive that said that they were trying to hold out the negotiations until some of these writers and actors started losing their homes. Like, wait, wait. And I just feel like, man, these studio execs, they were really about that. They were about that dollar. They were about that dollar. And some people might say not much else. So that's my nominee in this category. But Alex, I want to hear from you. Who did you nominate in this category? Villain of the Year.
My villain of the year is Ozempic.
Oh.
The quote-unquote miracle drug that basically makes you not want to eat, not want to drink, not want to smoke. Its intended use is for diabetes. But I think earlier this year there was so many people that were on Ozempic that there was a little bit of an Ozempic shortage, because it also, the side effects are drastic weight loss, and basically Ozempic curbs your urges. And so I think there's some studies that say, like, oh, you won't drink as much on it, and also, like, you won't smoke. You basically turn into like this little skinny robot. It's just like the open secret in Hollywood is that, like, is it really always diet and exercise that someone looks great? I mean, these rich people are always like, oh, it's just diet and exercise, but I think now there's this like trend of are they on Ozempic, and I hate that I think about it like this.
That's a very good pick, I think, for Villain of the Year. It's like I have such complicated feelings about Ozempic, because, like, on one hand, yes, it was not intended as a weight loss medication. It was intended for people with diabetes, and, like, obviously, like, as you mentioned, we do not want a shortage. But also, like, I can understand why a celebrity would feel pressure to lose weight. I can understand why they felt like they needed to use Ozempic, but also I'm like, but some people really need it. Some people really need it. It's just like, oh, it's just, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. Well, Aisha, who is your Villain of the Year? I'm dying to know.
This person really put put in the work, like had the dedication to claim this title. It was not easy, but they did it, and that is George Santos.
Oh.
Do you know how hard it is to get thrown out of Congress? Like, do you know?
I learned very recently, it's not an everyday kind of thing.
Do you know the work that you have to put in for them to be like, you got to go? You got to go. We may lose the majority, but you got to go. Do you know the work that you have to do? I mean, and he's like leaned into it. Like they kick him out and he's like, to hell with this place. Well, you know, the most disturbing thing, like at one point he was like holding a baby and we didn't know where the baby came from. And someone asked him, is that your baby? His response was, not yet. Who said that? Like, why are you letting this man like hold a baby?
That's the thing about George Santos, though, that is really compelling. I'll say I don't have like a genuine desire to see him necessarily parlay this into some other form of fame, but he does have a unique star quality.
There is no such thing as diva down. Okay, it's always diva up. So please continue to slay, and you're gonna go and do great things. No diva down nonsense.
It's a villain quality. He's a villain. Like people love villains.
Yeah, like and he kind of acknowledges it in the way that he comports himself and has comported himself this entire scandal. I mean, I don't know. There's like a little bit of gumption there, a little bit of like, you'll all see. You'll see. And I don't know, as a human being, I do respond to that.
You know, I mean, you steal your campaign money, you use it on OnlyFans and Sephora and like Botox. And
he's a man of the people. Like, that's the thing.
I mean, he did teach me. I was like, why isn't Sephora a campaign expense? Like, I would feel like moisturizer and sunblock.
Okay, and like blotting papers and powder. Like, to me, I just want to say, I kind of see where he's coming from.
I would be convicted of so many crimes if Sephora was not, like, if I was a politician, I would be convicted of so many crimes if Sephora wasn't covered.
All right, so those are our nominees for Villain of the Year. Hollywood studio execs, Ozempic and George Santos. All right, for our very last category, the Villain of the Year. The winner is... it's George Santos.
Oh my goodness.
Deserved.
Deserved.
Wow. Like I said, he put in a lot of work. And I also feel like maybe he went from Delulu to
Trululu. I think he went from Delulu to Trululu back to Delulu. But you know what though? He did all this off the back of his own Riz.
Of his Riz, yes, his Riz, whatever that is. Wherever he gets it from.
And then he'll go to prison Lulu or jail Lulu.
Yeah, it's like it's a strong possibility he could end up in prison Lulu.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily always where the Delulu pipeline has to end up. But you know what, George Santos? When you aim for the moon, you land amongst the stars. Wow. Wow.
Wow. What a year.
What a year. I mean, what a year. This concludes the It's Been a Minute Pop Culture Awards show for 2023. A huge congratulations to all our winners, losers, villains, and beefers. Oh my gosh, 2023. What a big year. And I'm so grateful that I got to unpack it with the two of you. Y'all ate. Like no crumbs.
Yes.
No crumbs.
I see what you did there. That's great.
Very
clever.
Callback. Very, very clever.
Callback. But yeah, y'all are so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
That was Aisha Roscoe, host of NPR's Weekend Edition, and Alex Abad Santos, senior correspondent at Fox. Thank you so much to our voting committee at NPR, and cheers to 2024. May the odds be ever in your favor. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR. And today, we're looking back at all the great music from 2023. In my humble opinion, it was a great year for music. And my guests, they think so too.
Music is better than ever.
Better than ever. That's a big claim. That's Nate Sloan, one of the co-hosts of the podcast Switched on Pop. He and his co-host, Charlie Harding, are some of the brightest minds in music journalism today. I sat down with both of them to talk about the big trends this year and to learn what albums are at the top of their own charts. Nate, Charlie, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thanks for having us. Brittany, so great to be here.
Oh my gosh, so happy to have you all here. I personally have enjoyed this year in music, but also I feel like there's been some big shifts and big trends that have been cresting this year that are a little different than what we've seen in the past couple. But before I go on and on about what I think, I would love to hear what you both think were the biggest trends that you saw happening in pop this year. Nate, we'll start with you. What was catching your ears?
I think one of the biggest things that Charlie and I noticed was the importance of celebrity in the world of music in 2023. I mean, this year was ruled by two people, Taylor and Beyonce. And their celebrity was like a lunar eclipse that just blocked out the sun for so many other artists and cultural moments. Something is happening on the charts that we haven't really seen in a long time, at least, which is that some of the older songs from these artists are coming back onto the charts, right? Taylor Swift's Cruel Summer is a Hot 100 song right now.
That was a song I had literally never heard before in my life, and I felt like every time I opened up TikTok, it was staring me in the face.
Yeah, these artists are like breaking some of the rules of how the popular music industry works, just from like the sheer power of their celebrity. This is kind of a new ecosystem for the music industry.
Yeah, we somehow simultaneously live in a world where we have a completely fragmented, non-monoculture. You are constantly discovering new songs on TikTok, and yet it's harder than ever for those artists, I think, to find staying power when there are compounding growth effects for these major celebrities. And I do think that Nate left one big celebrity out. Let's not forget about Barbie. Barbie gave us some of the biggest hits of this year. We had Nicki Minaj and his Ice Spice with Barbie World.
And I felt like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Big feel like I'm ready to run. I'm a 10, so I pull in a can. Jazzy, Stacy,
Dua Lipa, Dance the Night.
watch me.
We had Billie Eilish with What Was I Made For? Those songs were enormous and tied to one of the, well, she's not a celebrity, but she's a celebrity, right?
Yeah.
Barbie.
Yeah. That makes me think about something one of my NPR colleagues, Paul Qureshi, was talking about. He wrote an essay about, Billion Girls Summer, which is basically Taylor, Beyonce, Barbie. Beyonce didn't release any new music this year. She just went on tour.
Right. I was actually offended when Renaissance wasn't listed at the Grammys for 2023. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's like that was last year. You were like, she was snubbed again.
But at the same time, what's so fascinating about 2023 is that there are all these surprising smaller artists who have made their way into the charts, onto the top of streaming and radio play. Like, one of the coolest trends we saw in 2023 sonically was the explosion of Mexican regional music. Artists like Peso Pluma. Being like the number 5 streamed artist globally, crashing the charts. That was probably not on anyone's bingo card, and what a cool contrast to like the dominance of Taylor and Beyonce and all these other artists.
I think that the popularity of Peso Pluma and like Mexican regional music, which I know there's like a lot in the name.
Alt Latino has a great story on it. They should go listen.
Yes, good shout out to our colleagues. But yes, absolutely.
NPR plug, nice.
NPR plug, yes. But I mean, Mexican regional, it encapsulates a lot of different musical styles. But I don't know, one of the things that's so interesting about Peso Pluma's music is like, it has this sound that feels like a really interesting and fun departure from so much of the music in Spanish that manages to become popular in the United States. Like, it doesn't have that 808 bass, like no electronics. Like, you all recently talked about this on your show, and you made a great point connecting Mexican regional music to like the interests of young American Latinos who grew up listening to their parents' music. It's so interesting what that might say about the changing demographics of our country and also of music listenership.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's worth pointing out that the rise of Spanish-speaking music globally is so significant, right? Reggaeton is really like the most listened to genre globally. On Spotify's global top 10 artists, 3 of them are reggaeton artists.
Yeah. So much of that music has become pop music, and also there has been some talk about drop in like rap listenership in in American music. In the grand scheme of things, I think it is somewhat marginal, but I also think that like the popularity of reggaeton has something to do with that. Like I think that there's a way that those two things are connected. Like you're getting a similar sensibility in some ways, but with a sound that is different than the sound that's been dominant in hip hop for the past however long.
Right, and of course all the sounds of hip-hop are constantly bleeding into all other genres. I mean, it's still really one of the dominant sources of creativity, and you can hear hip-hop flows even in Taylor's latest work. You certainly hear in Ed Sheeran's work. Mm-hmm. You hear just the mixing and blending of different styles. Even Drake, you know, you expect all different kinds of vocal performance from him at this point. Some of these boundaries are probably looser than ever as genres just explode in new numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Do genres exist anymore? I think it's something that people have been speculating for a long time, but certainly the way that Spotify accounts for it, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of micro-genres that are built to try to reflect the diverse ways in which people are listening.
You're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce, chatting with Charlie Harding and Nate Sloan, co-hosts of the podcast Switched on Pop, to talk about the music trends that took us by surprise in 2023. Speaking of genres and different genre explosions, this has been a huge year for country music.
Yeah.
I Remember Everything by Zach Bryan and Casey Musgraves.
Pictures in passing time, you always smile like that when you're drinking.
Love my girl Spacey Casey.
Oh yeah.
But then there's also like the more controversial songs and artists like Jason Aldean and Morgan Wallen, the Fast Car remake of the famous Tracy Chapman song.
You got a fast car, and I want to take it to anywhere. Maybe we make
Jelly Roll. I did not know who this man was a month ago, and then I saw his testimony of an acceptance speech for winning, I think, Best New Artist at the CMAs this year. And he's now, you know, up for a Best New Artist Grammy Award next year. Like, why do you think country music had such a huge year in 2023?
Well, part of the reason is that the kind of culture war surrounding this music has thrust it into the spotlight. Country has kind of become a proxy for like so many of the larger cultural, social divisions. So, you know, there's this weird phenomenon where an artist like one of the ones you mentioned, Morgan Wallen, will do something controversial, and then his fans will say, we have to support him by streaming his music and sending him up to the top of the charts. Another example was this artist, Oliver Anthony, who had a viral song, Rich Men North of Richmond.
These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do.
This became sort of a political rallying cry for listeners. Let's boost this up to the top of the charts by and stick it to the liberals essentially by streaming this song. So that's like partially explaining the numbers. The other thing is that country is incredibly popular, and not just in terms of like political camps.
It's a popular sound.
It's the new methods that we use to measure listening habits just seem to reflect that a little bit more, because usually country was like the domain of radio, And so that was where it really thrived. Now country is moving into the world of streaming and YouTube. And so now we're seeing, oh yeah, actually a lot of people like country, and not just people in rural America, not just people in the South. I live in Los Angeles. I'm driving down the 110 highway, looking at the billboard for Crypto.com Arena. Zach Bryan, 2 nights, sold out. It's like, this is, everyone listens to country. It's an urban phenomenon, it's a rural phenomenon. We're just starting to see that actually reflected in some of the metrics of music listening habits.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
I think that another component is that, we were talking about how the sound of hip-hop bleeds into every other genre. And that's true. When you listen to Morgan Wallen, you hear his vocal phrasing that is borrowed from hip-hop flow, and you see him collaborating with hip-hop artists like Lil Durk. Country has found ways to become more relevant while also holding on to the tradition of perceived authenticity that is so important to that genre. So I think there's like a kind of numbers game in terms of the charts and the listening metrics better reflecting how many people listen to country, and then also artists finding ways to make their music more appealing to a really wide audience.
Coming up, Nate, Charlie, and I get into country music's dominance and the rise of AI artists. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR.
Support comes from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, offering expertise and tools to maximize your personal and corporate impact. Leverage corporate philanthropy, non-cash giving, and employee engagement programs to create community impact while enhancing brands and bottom lines. To learn more, contact Greater Cincinnati Foundation.
A world-famous author and theologian receives a visitor from abroad.
Mr. Lewis?
Mrs. Gresham?
I'm Joy Gresham.
But as their lives become intertwined, he learns to embrace the joy and pain of human love. Shadowlands by William Nicholson, starring Martin Jarvis as C.S. Lewis and Harriet Harris as Joy Gresham. Next time on LA Theater Works.
Saturday evening at 8 on 91.7 WVXU and 88.5 WMUB. Support comes from Matinee Musicale Cincinnati, holding its Nancy F. Walker Memorial Scholarships auditions on February 24th. Instrumental and vocal students in junior or senior years of high school or college studying classical music can apply by the January 29th, 2024 deadline. Details and application materials at matineemusicalcincinnati.org.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. From the Lodestar Foundation, inspired by the principle that helping someone else less fortunate is a path to a happier, healthier, and more meaningful life. Learn more at lodestarfoundation.org. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
You're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce, continuing my conversation with Charlie Harding and Nate Sloan, co-hosts of the podcast Switched on Pop. And we're looking back at the big shifts in music in 2023. I don't know if this is like something that is happening along gender lines or if it's marking a shift, but when I think about artists like Taylor Swift, Casey Musgraves, or even going back to like Shania Twain, it feels like when there's a popular woman in country who wants to capture a wider audience and play that numbers game, in some circles or in some ways can kind of become a persona non grata. Kind of just like,
oh, so frequently outcast. Yeah, that it just happens over and over again. The crossover of female country artists is treated very differently, I think, than when male country artists decide to throw an 808 beat on their song and sort of play act in the world and sounds of hip hop.
That's so interesting.
Jason Aldean has done that.
Yeah.
His song this year, which includes Dog Whistles to Lynching, try that in a small town.
Yeah, you think it's tough. You try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road.
He previously has used hip-hop sounds in his tracks, and him doing this very sort of like 90s maximalist country song today, which might sound authentic, is just showing, you know, an artist who feels very comfortable taking sounds, borrowing, playing with this idea of authenticity, and not having the same kind of vitriol that so many female artists have when they try to reach a larger audience.
I want to turn for a second to some music, or non-music, depending on who you ask, that's been put out this year by not artists.
Right.
I feel like this was the year of AI.
Yes.
Yeah. AI everywhere, but like, I recently saw a video of like this brunette kind of like AI Taylor Swift seeming character called Anna Indiana, singing about like burning down her hometown.
This town is full of broken dreams, shattered hopes and silent screams.
To the artists who do have over 1,000 listens. So hopefully those who are getting more listens will get paid more, and this sort of rounding error they're trying to account for. I think it's been a bit overblown. Bandcamp is a much more serious issue where if you're an independent artist, you probably rely heavily on Bandcamp as a place to sell your materials. And the fact that that company keeps getting bought and sold and gutted, I think will have a much more even significant impact on the indie music scene going forward.
I think people there's an increasing awareness of the plight essentially of the artists in the 2020s and in the face of these large systems that are conspiring to exploit them. So I hope that there is some cloud of possibility here for something good.
And at the same time, while the business maybe has been bleak, I feel like musically we have seen a lot of fun, creative changes that are highlighting.
Yes, to be clear, music is better than ever.
Better than ever. That's a big claim.
The music is doing great.
Major, thank you so much for joining today. There's like nobody else that I wanted to talk to.
The pleasure's all ours, Brittany. Your musical analysis is like PhD level, so it's always a pleasure.
Thanks again to Charlie Harding and Nate Sloan. You can find Switched on Pop wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Brittany Luce. You're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR.
Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Brittany. Hey, Brittany. Hi, Brittany. My name is Juliana, and my favorite holiday movie is Elf. I'm wondering what your favorite holiday movie is.
Well, first of all, hello, Juliana. Thank you so much for calling in with this question. I love holiday films, but I must admit, I have never seen Elf. I know it's an extremely popular film, but maybe that's what I'll do this holiday season. Watch Elf for the first time, like 20 years behind the rest of America. But back to the question at hand. There is just one movie that I feel does not get the love it deserves as a Christmas masterpiece. Okay? It involves international travel, corporate intrigue, politics, gourmet cooking, and Queen Latifah. That movie is Last Holiday.
I'm sure a disciplined woman such as yourself has a very useful purpose for this money.
I'm just gonna blow it. Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps right now. So for those of you who haven't seen it before somehow, Last Holiday is a 2006 film starring Queen Latifah, LL Cool J, and if you're really careful, you're gonna see a young Halle Bailey in there. Okay, so the story centers on this woman named Georgia. Georgia works in this department store in New Orleans where she sells cookware by doing cooking demonstrations in the store. Everybody loves her. She also has a crush on her coworker, played by LL Cool J. Georgia gets this scan back. If I'm going out with a bang. She cashes out her savings and her retirement money, and she decides to take herself on the vacation of a lifetime in the Czech Republic.
Madam Burt, welcome. I know that you'll find our presidential suite most comfortable.
So she decides to stay there for Christmas. I don't want to give everything away, but she gets to cook, she gets to see Smokey Robinson in concert, and she gets a little bit something of a makeover. It's really fun for me to see this Black woman in this really luxurious hotel spending all this money over Christmas, not being bothered by anybody, living out her dreams, eating gourmet meals 3 to 4 times a day. Don't get me wrong, I have a wonderful life, but if I could do that every day, y'all would never hear from me again. I'm sorry. I say all of that to say that Last Holiday, it's just one of those perfect Christmas movies. It has just enough Christmas magic, enough comedy, enough heartfelt little moments, and also like just an abundance of Christmas joy that is sure to bring a smile to anyone's face. Personally, I think that Last Holiday should be up there with like Home Alone and all these movies that they play on TV when the holidays come around. Honestly, it's like Rudolph, Macaulay Culkin, and Queen Latifah, okay? The 3 kings of Christmas. So thank you so much for calling in with this question, and have a great weekend. If you have a thought or question about pop culture, send us a voice memo at ibam@npr.org. That's IBAM@npr.org. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Bart Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McVeigh,
Corey Antonio Rose.
Our editor is Jessica Flachak. Engineering support came from
Neil T-Vault.
Our executive producer is Verlin Williams. Our VP of programming is Yolanda Sangre. Our senior VP of programming is
Anya Brentman.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Moose. Talk soon.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. And from BetterHelp.
The bus door opens. She climbs the steps, stands at the front of the bus, and makes her speech. But she does the job. When everybody emerges from the bus after the 3-day ride, they are not the exhausted, huddled masses that I expected they'd be. People are beaming, excited.
Hola, bienvenida. Fila, por favor.
Some carry suitcases, some carry plastic garbage bags filled with their stuff. In my terrible high school Spanish, I ask where they're from, and families look so happy when they answer. ¿De dónde viene?
Venezuela. Venezuela.
Venezuela. ¿De dónde viene? Honduras.
Honduras.
Colombia. ¿Y de dónde? Colombia. Colombia. Venezuela.
Venezuela.
They tell me they've been traveling for a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months. It's a dangerous trip for many of them through the Darien Gap. Most are from Venezuela, a lot of Colombia. There was one family where the dad privately shouted his answer like, I don't know about these people, but I definitely belong here. De Mexico! Arriba Mexico! That guy has family in New York. We're on their way to come pick him up. As everybody else got into the other bus Ottoman arranged and headed over to the Migrant Welcome Center at the Roosevelt Hotel, a once glamorous 1,000-room behemoth that fills a block of 45th Street. A place where back in the day you might spot JFK or Eisenhower or Guy Lombardo. That is now the city's new Ellis Island, the entrance point.
Salida, por favor.
Ottoman guides everyone off the bus into the lobby.
Hola, entra. Entra, por favor. Salir?
How much Spanish do you speak now?
None.
The Welcome Center at the Roosevelt Hotel is one part of the city's response. It's pretty well run. They have legal services to help you apply for asylum. There are free diapers and warm food. They replace your meds. The city started doing this when a kid showed up whose meds for epilepsy had been seized by Border Patrol. From here, they'll send you to one of the over 200 shelters around the city, which are mostly not as nice as this. Some are in school gymnasiums, office buildings. If you have family elsewhere in the country, there's a desk here where New York City will happily buy you a plane ticket to go live with them. It will not be New York's problem anymore. A fourth of the arrivals take that option. As this year ends, New York City is entering some new phase, this massive experiment in welcoming and providing services for so many new arrivals. It's put some 20,000 kids in schools. It's housing right now 60,000 migrants. Though in lots of ways it has not gone so well. It hasn't put newcomers on a path to jobs, places to live. But has any American city ever done this much for new arrivals, on this scale? Mayor Adams pointed out some cities do nothing. Texas, Governor Abbott does nothing.
I was on the border in El Paso. I saw what happened with people and children and families sleeping in airports, sleeping on the street. So don't critique.
You'll need to apply 3 more principles. First of all, you'll need active methods. If you try to memorize a list of words for a test tomorrow, the words will be stored for short-term memory, and you'll forget them after a few days. If you, however, want to keep words long-term, you need to revise them in the course of a few days repeatedly using the so-called spaced repetition. We're all very busy and no one really has time to learn a language today. But we can create that time if we just plan a bit ahead. There are so many things we can do without even planning that extra time, such as listening to podcasts on our way to work or doing our household chores. The important thing is to create a plan in the learning. I will listen to a YouTube video while having breakfast. If you create a system in your learning, you don't need to find that extra time because it will become a part of your everyday life. And finally, if you want to learn a language fluently, you need also a bit of patience. It's not possible to learn a language within 2 months, but it's definitely possible to make a visible improvement in 2 months if you learn in small chunks every day in a way that you enjoy. And there is nothing that motivates us more than our own success. I vividly remember the moment when I understood the first joke in German when watching Friends.
Wenn du diesen Knopf drückst, dann kriegst du von mir was zu hören.
I was so happy and motivated that I just kept on watching that day 2 more episodes. And as I kept watching, I had more and more of those moments of understanding these little victories. And step by step, I got to a level where I could use the language freely and fluently to express anything. I can't get enough of that feeling, and that's why I learn a language every 2 years. Now, some of you may be thinking, that's all very nice to enjoy language learning, but Isn't the real secret that you polyglots are just super talented and most of us aren't? Well, there's one thing I haven't told you about Benny. Benny had 11 years of Irish, Gaelic, and 5 years of German at school. Couldn't speak them at all when graduating. Up to the age of 21, he thought he didn't have the language gene and he could not speak another language. Then he started to look for his way of learning languages, and today, Benny can easily have a conversation in 10 languages. Does that sound like a miracle? Well, I see such miracles every single day. So if you've also tried to learn a language and you gave up thinking it's too difficult or you don't have the language talent, give it another try. Maybe you're also just one enjoyable method away from learning the language fluently. Maybe you're just one method away from becoming a polyglot.
That was translator and polyglot Lydia Makova. You can watch her full talk, The Secrets of Learning a New Language, at TED.com. Thank you so much for listening to our show this week, Found in Translation. This episode was produced by Harsha Nahata, Andrea Gutierrez, Lane Kaplan-Levinson, and Fiona Guerin. It was edited by Sanaz Meshkinpour and me. Our production staff at NPR also includes James Delabussy, Rachel Faulkner-White, Matthew Cloutier, and Katie Montenegro. Beth Donovan is our executive producer. Our audio engineers were Patrick Murray, Josh Newell, Hannah Glovna, and Trey Watson. Our theme music was written by Ramtin Arablouei. Our partners at TED are Chris Anderson, Colin Helms, Michelle Quint, Alejandra Salazar, and Daniela Valarezo. I'm Manoush Zamaroni, and you've been listening to the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
Support for the TED Radio Hour comes from Heather Sturt-Haga and Paul G. Haga, supporting African Wildlife Foundation, working to ensure the future of Africa's wildlife and wildlands. Learn more at awf.org. From Workday, committed to helping organizations adapt to change, using real-time data to uncover insights, stay decision-ready, and prepare for whatever's next. The finance, HR, and planning system for a changing world. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's around 4:58 and still 52 degrees and cloudy in Cincinnati. Still in need of a great gift? Cincinnati Edition gives holiday book recommendations from our experts. Plus, they get some movie and streaming ideas. Monday at noon and 8 o'clock on WVXU and WMUB. I'm Tony Ray, and up next, All Things Considered.
Support comes from Kentucky Proud. Kentucky farmers spend the year getting the ingredients ready for holiday cooking, posting, and toasting. Milk and eggs for pies, honey, wine, cheeses and meats for get-togethers, and turkeys and roasts for holiday dinners. Kentucky celebrates the holidays with products from Kentucky Proud Farms.
Public radio isn't something you think about all the time, but the stories you hear do stick with you. And the Public Radio podcast are some of your favorites, and you do listen every day. WVXU is your station. Listeners like you keep it going strong. Please donate at WVXU.org. Thank you.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
The Israeli government needs to be active to get the hostages back alive.
Anger grows as more details emerge about how Israeli soldiers accidentally shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages. For Saturday, December 16th, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow. More than 1 million electric vehicles were sold in the U.S. this year, but demand is slowing and many manufacturers are lowering production goals. We'll examine the state of the shift to electric. We'll also hear about a new investigation into how New York and other states credential doctors, and we'll look at the value of the chosen family at the holidays.
Take stock of the people who are around you, people who make you feel safe.
Plus, we'll hear from one of the finalists, the first ever competition to be crowned HBCU Band of the Year.
You can't say Jackson State University without mentioning the sonic boom of the South.
First, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst.
The top 2 U.S. military leaders are traveling to Israel to advise the Israeli government on how to transition from a major combat operation against Hamas in Gaza to a more precise and limited campaign. This after the sustained intensity of the campaign led President Biden to warn Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel is losing international support because of its, quote, indiscriminate bombing. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is getting worse. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports there's been a prolonged communications blackout in Gaza for almost 2 days, making it hard for aid groups to get information. But
from what we know, humanitarian conditions in Gaza are dire right now. Disease is spreading. People are living in overcrowded apartments with little access to medical aid or necessities. And, the World Food Program just put out a report recently saying that half of the households there are facing severe hunger.
NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reporting. Both Ukraine and Russia have reported dozens of drone attacks over the past day. NPR's Joanna Kakissis says tensions are high after the EU failed to approve more aid to Ukraine.
Ukraine's air defense says it downed all but one of the 31 drones launched across the country by Russian forces. Meanwhile, Russia says it destroyed a total of 53 Ukrainian drones. Most were in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory, but at least 6 were shot down over Russia's Kursk region, which borders Ukraine. Ukraine says it will lose this war without continued support from the U.S. and the EU, and that support is now in limbo. At an EU summit on Friday, the pro-Kremlin leader of Hungary vetoed the equivalent of more than $54 billion in aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, in the U.S., congressional Republicans are holding up more than $61 billion in aid. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
A record jump in homelessness over the last year was driven by people who lost housing for the first time. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports a key factor was skyrocketing rent.
During the pandemic, federal aid kept many people from being evicted, but that ran out last year, just as inflation spiked and median rent hit a record high. Jeff Olivet heads the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness.
We simply don't have enough homes that people can afford. And when you combine rapidly rising rent, you get this vicious game of musical chairs.
Olivet says there's only one affordable place for every 3 renters who need it. More cities are opening up zoning to ease the housing shortage, and apartment construction is way up. The new count finds more than 650,000 people living in tents, cars, or shelters. A quarter of them are seniors. Jennifer Levin, NPR News, Washington.
And you're listening to NPR News from Washington. The annual defense authorization bill, which Congress passed this week, is on its way to President Biden's desk for his signature. And along with compromises and military raises, the $866 billion act also includes a measure that prevents a president from withdrawing the U.S. from NATO without congressional approval. President Biden supports the alliance, but when former President Trump was in office, he blasted the alliance and questioned its collective defense stance, which says if one member is attacked, all will defend. The measure had bipartisan support. TV personality Mayim Bialik has announced she will no longer co-host the syndicated game show Jeopardy! NPR's Chloe Veltman reports she and Sony announced the decision in separate statements on social media.
Mayim Bialik joined Jeopardy! As a host 2 years ago. A promotional video for the show from that time conveys the Big Bang Theory actor's excitement.
I've been a Jeopardy! Fan my entire life, but being the next Jeopardy! Guest host, dream come true.
Bialik won a Primetime Emmy nomination for her hosting, but she stepped away from her duties earlier this year in solidarity with striking Hollywood writers. Former Jeopardy! Champion Ken Jennings took over hosting full-time in Bialik's absence. In a statement on Instagram, the show's producer, Sony Pictures Television, said in an effort to maintain continuity for its viewers, Jennings will now continue to be Jeopardy's sole host. In her own Instagram post, Bialik expressed gratitude for her time with the show. Chloe Veltman, NPR News.
And I'm Janine Herbst. And you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from Neon with Ferrari. Michael Mann's film about Enzo Ferrari fighting to save his empire, his family, and win the biggest race of his career. With Adam Driver, Penelope Cruz, and Patrick Dempsey. Opens in theaters Christmas Day.
Support comes from Artichoke, where you can find holiday gifts for everyone on your list who loves cooking and entertaining. Locally owned and operated on Elm Street between Finley Market and Rhinegeist, their original location has everything for the kitchen, while their annex features tableware, barware, linens, sourced internationally as well as from local craftspeople. Open daily until December 31st.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow. We begin this evening in Israel, where the country's military is providing more information about what is being called a grave error. 3 Israeli hostages being held in Gaza were killed Friday by Israeli soldiers. According to the Israeli military, the soldiers mistakenly believed the 3 hostages, who were all men, posed a threat. Meanwhile, in Gaza, which remains under heavy bombardment by Israel, a nearly total communications blackout has been in place. Let's get the latest from NPR's Carrie Kahn in Tel Aviv. Hey, Carrie.
Hi.
So let's start with the killing of these 3 hostages by Israeli soldiers. What have you learned about what exactly happened to them?
A military spokesman briefed reporters today on what the Army knows of now. The official said the 3 hostages were shirtless and carrying a stick with a white flag on it when they were confronted by soldiers. He said the hostages were in an area of intense fighting, and they were perceived as a threat. That's what he said, and 1 soldier fired on all 3. 2 were killed instantly, and 1 ran into a building. There were cries in Hebrew for help from the building, and the soldiers were ordered to cease fire, but in unclear circumstances, the 3rd hostage was killed in what the Army official told us was a clear violation of Israel's rules of engagement, and the investigation continues.
I mean, there's something like 100 people still being held hostage. This has understandably been such an emotional topic in Israel. How has the public reacted to this news?
The reaction has been swift, and they are angry. A few hours ago, family members spoke to a large crowd gathered at this plaza here in Tel Aviv, and they're demanding that the government do more to bring the hostages home. Here is Ruby Shen. His 19-year-old son Itai was kidnapped and remains captive in Gaza.
The Israeli government needs to be active. They need to put an offer on the table, including prisoners with blood on their hands, to get the hostages back alive.
The family members and their supporters have said they will now sit outside a government building here in Tel Aviv where Israel's war cabinet meets, and they'll do that until the government begins negotiating for the hostages' release. I went to a march last night where angry protesters were venting their frustrations at the news of the killings of the hostages, and I heard that again tonight. Everyone I talked to starts off saying they don't blame the soldiers who killed the hostages. There is a lot of sympathy for the soldiers. They blame the Israeli government for not doing enough to bring the hostages home.
Anger at the government, sympathy for the soldiers. Interesting. Meanwhile, what do you know about what exactly is happening in Gaza today?
There continues to be heavy air and ground fighting there. Casualties continue to mount, with the Gaza Health Ministry reporting nearly 19,000 Palestinians now killed since the Israeli campaign began. In the past 2 days, though, there has been a major communications blackout in Gaza. We had not heard from NPR's producer, Anas Baba, there for more than 36 hours. We finally heard from him last night. He is in Rafah in the south, where Israel has told Gazans to go for their safety. And he reported to us seeing airstrikes there and sent us this voice memo from a morgue in the city where he witnessed a dozen dead bodies.
Among those 12 dead bodies that I'm seeing in front of me, there is 2 children. The families, the relatives, all of them gathered in the morgue. And at the moment they're saying the farewell and praying for them.
Israel's military reports that at least 116 of its soldiers have died in the ground offensive, and it launched that after Hamas invaded southern Israel on October 7th and killed about 1,200 people and took about 240 hostages.
NPR's Carrie Kahn in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
He was rushing just to go here.
This is a persecution violations of national security laws. We need one more indictment conspiracy to close out this election.
He actually just stormed out of the court.
Innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
It's time for Trump's trials, a weekly take on the multiple cases former President Donald Trump is facing. Today we're focusing on the January 6th federal election interference case, one of the two cases brought by Special Counsel Jack Smith. This week, Smith filed a request to the U.S. Supreme Court asking them to answer this key question. Can presidents be criminally prosecuted for crimes they're alleged to have committed while in office? This question is essential because if the Supreme Court decides Trump does have criminal immunity, then that really undercuts Smith's entire case. Once again, we are here with NPR senior political editor and correspondent Domenico Montanaro. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Scott. Great to be here as always.
And we're also joined by Harry Littman, a former U.S. attorney and deputy assistant attorney general. These days, he's a law professor. Welcome, Harry.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So, Domenico, let's start with you. Can you briefly explain what exactly presidential immunity is, what president has it, what we're talking about here?
How long do we have? I mean, it's such a... Okay, well, I'll keep it short then. The fact is, it's not really 100% clear that it even exists, right? I mean, like, the Supreme Court has had sort of differing opinions on this. There's some interpretation within parts of the Constitution, but the Constitution doesn't make immunity something that's clear. There's sort of, you know, guidelines within the Justice Department that have cropped up to say that they won't pursue a president essentially while they're president.
Right, we spent a lot of time talking about that the first couple of years.
Right, with the Mueller investigation and everything. But now, what this really comes down to is, you know, whether or not Trump was acting as a candidate or whether or not he was acting as president.
And Harry, I want to ask you about Smith's decision to appeal directly to the Supreme Court in a moment. But first, is there any key thing to think about on the issue at question, presidential immunity, what's been written before, what's been ruled before, or what we've seen in the rulings so far from Chutkan and others?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Domenico is a secret lawyer. He basically pinpoints that there is nothing said in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court has basically decided, look, there are certain instances that would so impair the operation of the executive branch. For instance, I'm sure they would say, being in jail and trying to run the government, that we discern immunity. So immunity is just a kind of a policy call that they make to further the relations between, and the separation of powers among the branches. To Smith's move, I think it was really a masterstroke and one of those moves that, like, looked brilliant in retrospect, but nobody thought of, because there's two things happening, right? There's the immunity issue itself, which probably is the big one that is going to go to the Supreme Court, and then there's the ticking clock. Yeah. And so normally when you're ahead in the game, you let the other person, plod through. But there is this rare device where you can jump the line and take it right to the Supreme Court, and he was thinking, I think, if, it may come to that anyway, and if we lose, we're toast in any event. Yeah. So let's try to tee this up, because it's for the one trial that has the best chance of going forward and finishing before November 2024.
On this immunity question, have we gotten a sense yet what the court has made of this request and what sort of timeline we're thinking about from a court ruling?
We have, in terms of the timeline, Scott. So what we know is they hopped to when the DOJ asked them and made Trump submit a response, which would normally be 30, 45-day affair. You can get an extension by Wednesday. So they gave him 9 days. And we think they're going to have this on this super fast track. The best precedent for it is U.S. versus Nixon. So we know that they're going to move very quickly in deciding whether to take up the issue. No hints further than that, but that's a pretty big one. Just a quick note on the timing. Chutkan earlier this week said, I don't have jurisdiction anymore, and so I'm letting this go for now. The DOJ said, you can't set a trial, sure, but you could still keep going with the discovery, and she said no. So that means that every day now that we have until they decide immunity is basically 1 for 1 a day that the trial is being pushed back. So we really are looking, even in the best case, at a 30, 60-day delay.
Okay, and Domenico, that's where the intersection with the political world is really important here. This trial was set to start March 4th. Trump is far and away the leading candidate in the Republican field. Walk us through how quickly he could sew up the Republican nomination next year.
Well, March 5th is the next day, and that's Super Tuesday, and 36% of all of the delegates will be allocated on that day. And by the end of March, you'll have 70% of the delegates already allocated in the Republican primary. So, you know, instead of almost looking at this as a convergence of the political and legal calendars, I'm starting to see a divergence in the two, because as these cases sort of get pushed further and further down the line, you're going to have a situation where the Republican nominee is essentially going to be sewn up sometime in the early spring, and you're going to have the trials really just starting to start up. Potentially, even we're thinking about this case in Georgia in August, right in the middle of the heat of a presidential general election.
Harry, any sense that the court's ultimate ruling on this immunity question could affect the other three criminal cases we're talking about, the classified documents and obstruction in Mar-a-Lago, the Georgia election interference case, or the New York campaign finance case?
What they're going to be asked to rule is a president, when she or he is president, has immunity. But former presidents, not yet presidents, they don't have immunity. So the New York conduct, recall that's in the heat of the campaign with Stormy Daniels. The Mar-a-Lago is after he's out, when he no longer has entitlement. The Georgia case is down the middle. He is president. There's a little wrinkle in that it's a state case, not a federal case. But if the Supreme Court were to find immunity for a president in a situation, I think it would necessarily have to hold as against a state as well that's trying to indict him.
All right, Harry Littman, a former U.S. Attorney and Deputy Assistant Attorney General and a law professor, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Domenico Montanaro, thanks as always to you.
As always, thank you.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
We live in a diverse and dynamic community with new things to discover at every turn. I'm Tana Weingartner, and it's an honor to meet people, learn their stories, and share them with you every day here on 91.7 WVXU, 88.5 WMUV, and online at WVXU.org.
Support comes from the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub, wishing all happy holidays. Open till December 16th. And back in the new year to help provide a place where almost anything can be recycled or reused. Discover how you can be part of the solution with tax-deductible donations at cintirrh.org.
It may sound like the start of a joke. Why was there a rooster on a light pole in downtown Cincinnati? But it's not. Is the current question answered on Bill Reihart's OK Want to Know, now available for listening or reading on our website, wvxu.org.
I'm Janine.
entirely plain sailing, is it? I think Harry's trying to say it's against the rules. She's a divorced woman, Jack. The bishop would never let me.
I'm going to marry her, Harry. If you won't do it, I shall find someone who will.
I don't make the rules.
Jack, I can't pretend to understand what's happening to you, but if this is what you want, I wish you both happy.
I'm really sorry, Jack.
That's all right, Harry. I understand. I'm going back to the hospital now. It's me again.
Did you go?
I went, and I came back.
This dope thing gave me. I get confused.
Does it help the pain?
Oh, yes. This is a strange sensation. Like the pain's still going on down there, but it's nothing to do with me.
Is your mind clear now?
How would I know? Try me.
What's 58 take away 41?
17.
That's how old I was when you were born.
I was a baby. You were almost a man. For a while back there, I thought I might just catch you up, but here I am, back to being a baby again.
Joy.
Still here.
I'm going to marry you, Joy. I'm going to marry you before God and the world.
You don't have to, Jack.
I want to. It's what I want.
Make an honest woman of me?
Not you, Joy. I'm the one who hasn't been honest. Look what it takes to make me see sense.
Think I overdid it.
Don't leave me, Joy.
Back home, we have a quaint old custom. When the guy has made up his mind he wants to marry the girl, he asks her. It's called proposing.
It's the same here.
Did I miss it?
Where's your hand? Will you marry this foolish, frightened old man who needs you more than he can bear to say and loves you even though he hardly knows how?
Okay, just this once. I, Joy, take thee, Jack.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
To love, cherish, and obey.
To love, cherish, and obey.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
With this ring I thee wed.
With this ring I thee wed.
With my body I thee worship.
With my body I thee worship.
With all my worldly goods I thee endow.
With all my worldly goods I thee endow.
In the name of the Father.
In the name of the Father.
And of the Son.
And of the Son.
And of the Holy Ghost.
And of the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
Amen.
Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. For as much as Jack and Joy have consented together in holy wedlock, and have made witness of the same before God and this company, I pronounce that they be man and wife together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
She's asleep.
I brought you this magic apple, Mom.
Well, Mr. Lewis, I think I'm in no danger of overstating the case if I say no news is good news. Given the seriousness of her condition, we have reason to be cautiously optimistic.
I'm sorry, Doctor, but I don't understand a word you're saying. It would help me if you would use words I'm familiar with, like getting better, getting worse, dying.
I'm afraid none of those words meet the case. What seems to be happening is that the rate of spread of the disease is slowing down.
You mean she's getting better?
She's not getting worse.
Is not being worse better than being worse?
Put like that, yes.
Then she's getting better, isn't she?
Mr. Lewis, you're looking at a train standing in a station. It may not be moving right now, but trains move. That's how trains are.
What would be a good sign? People do recover from cancer. It has been known.
Any sign of returning strength. Any sign that the body is rebuilding the diseased bone.
Did you expect her to make it this far?
You didn't expect her to make it this far, did you?
Thank you, Doctor. Well, I should have brought you something, shouldn't I? Flowers. Grapes. Why grapes, I wonder?
Just bring me books, Jack. I'm going crazy here. The nurse has been telling me all about her love life. She's been dating this guy for 2 years. Will he marry her? How far should she let him go without being at least engaged? I'm telling you, I was sick with excitement. But she doesn't see him again till Saturday, so I need books.
It strikes me you're rather better.
Shh. We have to pretend we haven't noticed, or he'll take it away.
So what advice did you give the nurse?
I said, give him enough to make him want the rest, then nothing till he pays up.
Poor fellow, he hasn't a chance.
Jack, if I get better, do I have to give the ring back?
No, that's yours forever, Joy. For all eternity.
You don't have to feel sorry for me now.
Nor for myself. I just want some time with you, Joy.
Shh. Speaking of him, how did you square it?
Marrying you?
Yes. You're not the sort to say it's wrong, but I want it anyway.
I did think about it, yes. The argument I gave myself went like this. I want to marry Joy, but if she's married to someone else, I can't. Whatever a divorce court decrees, marriage is indissoluble in the eyes of God. But you see, your husband had been married before. If marriage is indissoluble, he's still married to his first wife. If he's still married to his first wife, he can't have married you. Not in the eyes of God.